this first one, it's up 3.1% year to date. And in a lot of ways, this exhibit shows you why we have bonds in a portfolio, that we're trying to achieve a long-term high rate of return, is to serve as a buoy in challenging environment like what we've been faced with here. This is kind of one of the extreme environments. So you can imagine if your portfolio was, as Dan said, just use a simple example, if you were 60% equity and 40% stocks to start the year, and your stocks go down 20% or more, and your bonds are up a little bit, your percentages are going to be, you have a lot more, your bond percentage of your total assets go down, but your bond percentage actually goes up as a portion of this. So what I'll do here is let me switch to another screen, and I'll show you the do you see the same thing, or do you see something different?
No, that's the cash flow worksheet.
Okay, good. It looks different on my, so the cash flow.
Tony, excuse me, just remember some people are calling in, so
okay.
Explain it because they can't see the chart.
Thanks, Dan. Okay, thank you. Yeah. So what this page shows you, and I'll articulate it as well for the folks without the visual, is where the portfolio stood as of Friday night. So that this doesn't include the bounce today. But we were, the blue column right here in the middle is the target allocation. And at the end of the year, the portfolio was basically right on the target allocation because we rebalance the portfolio back to target on a fairly regular basis. And usually markets don't move quite as sharply as they have this year. So we can rebalance and use cash flows as a way to get the portfolio back close to target. The target is 37% in fixed income. At the end of business on Friday, we were at almost 43% fixed income, so about a 6% overweight. And again, that's just by virtue of market movement, stocks going down a lot and bonds performing modestly positive. By way of kind of reconciling with where we were at the end of the year, you can see down at the bottom of the page, the total portfolio assets today for the city employees plan is 36.1 million. It was 43.8 million at the end of the year. So a markdown of more than $7 million. Our proposal is to rebalance back to targets. And again, that goes to that disciplined approach that we think is tried and true of rebalancing back to targets. When equities are overweight, we sell equities and buy bonds, and vice versa in this case. What we would all love to do is get out of the market, wait till the bottom, and then buy equities and ride it all the way up. There is no way to know when that will be. It sounds good. There are some folks out there who claim they can do it. We spend, we have a dedicated research team that just looks for investment managers, and they haven't been able to find anybody that does that successfully. So while that sounds good and seems natural, one of the comments that folks have kind of said over the last few weeks is, well, why don't we just get out of the market or get really conservative, wait till things calm down, and then go back into equities when that happens. And while we don't know what's going to happen in the future, what we know is in the past, the market is a forward-looking mechanism, and it would be very unusual and atypical for the market for everything to work out in a really smooth waterfall of, okay, we get COVID-19 under control, we have things calm, and then the markets bottom and start to move up. Usually what happens is the markets start the rebound before the recovery in the economy, or in this case, in the healthcare world, gets fully in place. So you think back to like the financial crisis, March of 2009, early March of 2009 was the bottom. That was probably 4 months before things started to feel a little bit better, sort of on Main Street. September 11th, same thing. The markets rebounded very quickly, actually, after September 11th, a lot faster than we all felt safe at airports, I think. So I explained the rationale for the rebalancing, and now explain the approach. Our proposed approach, in the spirit of dollar cost averaging, is to not move entirely back to target, but rather to move about half of the overweight to fixed income back to target. And for those that can see it, that's what's reflected in that cash flow column. For the city employee plan, take about $695,000 out of bonds and sprinkle that across equities. And that would get our fixed income to about 40.9%. And our proposal further would be to take the next step or do the second half in 2 weeks, assuming the imbalance is in place. Now, maybe today's rally, it gets continued and the markets take care of this imbalance and move us back to target, in which case we wouldn't take the second step towards the rebalance. Maybe the markets sell off further, in which case we would take the next step and then maybe have to do another one. So to the extent you're comfortable, we would seek permission or a vote to do the rebalance as reflected in the cash flow worksheets here, and then to do another one in 2 weeks should the imbalance remain intact.
I guess that's it, Mayor. So we're going to the trustees first for questions, if you have any questions for Tony, and then lastly for a vote to do some cost averaging and rebalance the portfolio.
Okay, so
Hi, it's Bob.
hold
sorry.
on. Yeah, that's all right. So I didn't take a motion to open this for discussion. So why don't I start with that? Now, keep in mind that if you're going to make the motion, you must state your name, your title, and then make the motion. So do I have a motion to vote to rebalance the portfolio for police and fire pension fund and the City of Torrington Employees Retirement Fund?
Yes, we do, Mayor. Robert Conforti Jr., Board of Public Safety Commissioner. I'd like to make a motion to change that. Thank you.
Okay, so the motion was made by Robert Conforti, Commissioner of the Board of Safety. Do I have a second? State your name before you make this, please.
Ed Delisle, Torrington Fire Department, trustee. Second.
Thank you, Ed. All right, so the floor is open. Are there questions for Mr. Triangisi?
I'd like to ask a question. This is Bob Conforti again. What's going to happen? I know things are changing. I pulled my 401k out 2 years ago, so I'm safe. But what's going to happen to people that are going to be retiring within the next, say, 6 months to 2 years, as far as their 401ks?
So
Well, go ahead, Tony. You want to take it?
Okay,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I didn't mean to.
That's right.
I would say that so depending on how they were allocated, likely if they were exposed to equities, there's a pullback in their value. The best example.
Yeah, I realize that they're all going down, so that's why I was asking that question, because.
But the best what I do want to point out, and we never know, and every environment is different. But if you think back to the financial crisis, where we saw, at least so far, what was a similar market pullback.
Right.
Very meaningful. The financial crisis was down more than what we are down so far. A couple years out, if someone was retiring in 2020, or back then in 2010, let's say, and had an investment in one of those target date 2010 funds, they lost considerable value, call it 20%, in a balanced portfolio. But within 2 years, if they stayed invested, they had recovered all of that and were on their way back.
Okay. I wasn't sure how the recovery would work, but yeah, because if that would definitely, I knew they wouldn't stay in the same level they were at. If they retired at that, whatever the lower level would be, I knew it would increase, but I didn't know if it would go back to where it was before.
Yeah, I mean, we don't know, this time could and will be different. I'm sure the playbook will be different,
Okay.
but that's the
At least I
plan.
have some answers.
Thank you, Bob. Are there other questions for Tony?
Hi, Mayor. Mayor Glenn McLeod. I have one quick question.
Sure, Glenn.
Tony, what is the danger of writing this out?
And by writing it out, do you mean not doing the rebalance?
Not making any changes.
Yeah. So the danger, I guess, would be your participation in the ultimate rebound. So if the market, let's say you didn't do it, and then the markets ultimately rebound, you'll have less exposure to equities than you otherwise would have if you did the rebalance. So we are not trying to call the bottom. We probably will not call the bottom here. But if you institute the plan that we propose and the markets rebound, you'll be in a better place than if you don't do that. It's on the fringes. We're talking about a 6% of the portfolio.
Okay, thank you.
Frank Rubino, Councilman. So your average ratio for the first 2 weeks is going to be 2.3%, you said? And then 3.6 to make the 6% of transfer? Tony, what were your numbers of transfer, in other words?
Yeah, so I'm rounding, but it's about 3% each time.
Okay, so we're going to do 3 now, and then in 2 to 3 weeks, we'll review it again.
That's right.
So we're only talking about a 3% change.
At this time.
Okay.
Tony, that would mean we'd have to go back to another meeting here with all the trustees for the other 3% again. Is that what we want to do?
It's not like we all have a lot to do, Dan.
Okay.
Yeah, and I don't mind.
I hate to say it that way, but you know.
Oh, okay.
And I don't mind it either. I'd much rather see do small steps. You don't want to jump too quick right now.
Dustin Bingham, Commissioner on the Board of Public Safety. To me, this just seems a little bit reactionary at this stage of the game. When you're looking at the first slide that you had up, when you look at the S&P, it had the highest rate of return over the 10-year span. When you convert it over to bonds, you're going to be losing at about 5-6% of that. While we're only diversifying a small percentage of the total fund amount, it still could be a loss of, from just my quick math, about $70,000 from the deltas between the returns.
So Dustin, I think that speaks maybe a little bit to the target allocation as opposed to the rebalancing.
Yeah.
So the target allocation is lined up to try to achieve the objective established, in coordination with the actuarial expected return. And that's why we're at 37% in fixed income. I do think one of the byproducts we'll see, so this is maybe a little bit early, but one of the potential byproducts of the environment that we're in and all the fiscal and monetary support will be, when we get through the COVID-19 environment, is potentially having less in traditional bonds, because rates are so low today that the challenge of them in non-health crisis environment, providing helping us meet our expected returns is even more dramatic. So the proposal is to sell bonds and buy equities. You'll be happy if equities ultimately rebound, and that's what we think the case will be. We think we'll be sitting here in a couple of years and people will say, the spring of 2020 was a good entry point into equities. But like I said, we won't call the bottom. We're not trying to, and we know that there's no tried and true approach to do that.
Well, following up on what Commissioner McLeod said, and similar to like what you're talking about with the actuarial models, what is the timeline of expected withdrawals? Do we have that in mind of when people are going to retire, or when people are going to need their funds, frankly? Yeah,
that's part of the analysis. The both of the plans, even though they're in a kind of a closed status, I guess, have a very long life. And as a result, that's one of the benefits in asset allocation when you have a lot of time. If this was money that needed to be spent in 2 years or 5 years, you'd have it allocated different than if you have a much longer life, which is what these plans. I don't have the exact numbers off the top of my head, but it's many years out.
No, the reason why I'm bringing that up is on that concern is when you're looking at reallocating only 6% of that. I give it that. It's not a huge amount, but it's still a reallocation of something that is at its low, or may or may not be at the absolute bottom at this point in time, but it's low. Why not wait to allow it to get back to where it was at, say, a year ago, before it started to drop, following that model?
So you could do that. If we waited till stocks got back to where they were a year ago, that means we miss really a 25 or 28% return from here, because you have to go up more than 20% to get back to the 20% you lost. And this rebalancing is actually kind of the opposite mindset, where we're saying, let's try to make sure we're fully exposed to equities when that rebound occurs. So we suffered the pain. Let's now let's participate in the upside when that does happen.
Then I guess I misunderstood the second slide where the rebalancing looked like it was coming out of the equity and going into the bond market.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. Then I must have I'm sorry if I misstated that. We're coming out of bonds and putting it into stocks.
Okay.
Yep. I'm sorry about that confusion.
Oh, then I'm game for that.
Are there any other questions for Tony at this time?
No, the only comment I'd like to make is the firefighters I've been speaking to and police officers, I don't think we have that many retiring in the next couple of years. Oh, this is Conforti again. The ones I've been speaking to are more like 5-6 years out. So I think it gives us a little bit of time to pull things back into place and rebound. That's why I decided to go with what I went with, rather than ride it low now. I don't think that's the right thing to do.
All right, so just so we're clear, what the recommendation is, and Tony, help me if I may state it. So the recommendation is that we do a 3% adjustment at this time, and then come back in a couple of weeks to reevaluate it and make that next level of adjustments at that time. Is that correct?
Yes.
Tony, you got it? Okay.
Yes, I'm sorry. Yes.
No, that's fine.
That's
I thought we muted you. Sorry about that.
okay.
All right, so then the
Yeah.
motion is, and the motion was made by Robert Conforti and seconded by Ed Delisle. So would you amend your motion to reflect a 3% adjustment being made, or balancing being made at this time? Bob and Ed.
Yes, I will, Mayor.
Okay.
And I'll second that one also.
Okay, good. All right, if there are no other questions, then I'm going to call the motion. Last call for questions. Hearing none, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, this motion carries. That's all that we had on this agenda. So I'll take a motion to adjourn. Again, state your name and then state the motion.
I'd like to make a motion, Mayor, Commissioner Conforti, and I'd like to tell everybody to stay safe and lay low.
Okay, so motion to adjourn made by Robert Conforti. Do I have a second?
Sharon Wagner, second.
Thank you. Second by Councilwoman Wagner. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any
Aye.
opposed? All right, we're done. That's it. Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Be safe.
Night.
Stay well.